So my name's Nikki Rossi. I've written a series of books, the Rockstar Ending books, and they are fundamentally about an ordinary woman who discovers she's capable of extraordinary things. They're set in London in 2027, and some of you may recognise the neighbourhood. Lexi didn't always manage to get to the summer fair in her local park, but this time she was going to make a point of going so she could take Bob along. He hadn't been before and she thought he'd enjoy it. The weather was just right, warm but a bit overcast, so they were comfortable walking about and faced little danger of sunburn. The fun was due to begin at noon, but they didn't get there until gone one, as they'd been lazing around at home, doing weekend jobs like paying bills online and listening to the radio together. Lexi particularly liked the dog show, which was already in full swing when they found the makeshift grassy arena. None of the entrants had been particularly well trained or immaculately groomed, but they seemed to be enjoying themselves, as did their owners. There was a sign saying, "No drones within 100 metres of the dog show arena," after someone had inadvertently crashed one into a massive, soft-hearted Akita the previous year. Fortunately, the drone came out worse, as the machine had disturbed the dog's normally docile temperament and ended up in 1,000 pieces. The common had been divided into several sections for the event, which was one of the highlights of the local calendar. Along the south side were about 50 tabletop sales where residents displayed a hodgepodge of second-hand goods, trying to purge their houses of old clothes, pots and pans, jewellery and books that no longer fitted into their lives. There was a communal stall which took donations of cakes from local people who felt like baking something. It was nice to see that tradition was still going strong. One year she'd contributed an ice sponge herself. The plan had been to simply dust a jam Victoria sandwich with icing sugar, but she had a disaster with her unpredictable oven and ended up burning the thing. So she'd scraped off the worst of the carbon and slathered it in cream cheese frosting. It looked fantastic from the outside, but she felt sorry for whoever ended up taking it home. Lexi grabbed a cupcake and began to feel jumpy from the first bite, as the potent cocktail of sugar and butter generously piled on its top sped from her mouth towards her heart. Bob shook his head and refused all temptation until he finally broke at an impressive sausage stand called the Muncher from Munich. He proceeded to create an abstract impressionist work of art on his t-shirt with a detritus from a supersized hot dog loaded with fried onions, mustard and ketchup, before proclaiming the Munich Mega Munch to be the best he had ever tasted. It was fun being here with Bob after all those years of wandering around the park in a solitary frame of mind. She hadn't been particularly unhappy when she was single, but she was definitely having more fun now. She passed Bob a tissue from her pocket to try to clean up his face, which he did with moderate success. The shirt would need dealing with later. Circling around again, they came across a place where several local community groups had set up. There were information booths and they were giving out leaflets. Lexi had a chat with the people from the Women's Equality Party and saw her local MP, Nikki Hart, who was out and about as usual. She liked her when she met her canvassing on her doorstep. Although Lexi was suspicious of politicians, she thought Nikki seemed like a nice enough person and had made some speeches about issues that Lexi was interested in. A former teacher like her, she felt she had a good grasp of what life was like outside the Westminster bubble and cared quite a bit about helping people. Youthentic's booth was blasting out aggressive sounding rap music, surrounded by a group of about 40 young people in exuberant mood. Not one of them was over 30, and most were still in their teens. When young people had started to get more political, supporting the Me Too movement, getting angry about Brexit and then climate change, Lexi had thought it an admirable thing. She'd encouraged the kids at school to get involved, and even persuaded the head not to exclude children who'd bunked off to take part in protests. Ever practical, she'd recruited a couple of former pupils to run an after-school club where the young activists could catch up on whatever they'd missed. Youthentic formed not long after, led by a loosely convened assembly representing young people from a very broad set of backgrounds. Every class, race, gender and hair colour, except grey, beamed out from the images of their meetings that saturated social media. A positive new force was emerging, they said, one that would build social cohesion and help repair a nation worn down by austerity and grown weary of division. By targeting constituencies with high student populations and using sophisticated campaigning techniques, Youthentic had managed to get enough seats in a fragmented parliament to be able to drive through their biggest idea, the maturity premium, which incentivised redistribution of wealth from the old to the young. After her conversation with Elsie, Lexi found the youthie's presence chilling. It was made worse when she overheard a tall, pale man talking. He had thin-dyed black hair, deathly pale green eyes, and wore a Slayer t-shirt. The guy was surrounded by a small group of earnest young activists who were nodding furiously in agreement with everything he said. They haven't a clue what they're dealing with. He laughed loudly. I'm telling you, it's really happening, before lowering his voice out of earshot. There were t-shirts for sale. On the front was the old road sign that signalled no waiting, a blue circle surrounded by a red border with a diagonal cross. The back bore the Youthentic hashtag, Our Time. Metal sigils, the cut-out circle with a diagonal cross, were set into rings and available as earrings and pendants, which dangled from cords woven through with red and blue. Another few years, and we can join that lot, Bob said, pointing in the opposite direction, as they wandered past a gazebo emblazoned with the word seniority and the strapline, things can only get better, fighting for the over 50s. He was walking past it towards a booth promoting men's health. They were trying to get people to sign up for a fun run, which was also designed to promote the benefits of testicular self-examination. Self-imagination, goodness, what's that? Self-examination. A video was running in the back, which Lexi wasn't sure she wanted to see. Why don't you go in there with those blokes, and I'll have a look in here, Lexi suggested, thinking it would be a good idea for Bob to get a few health tips, but not wanting to be faced with the explicit content, or be persuaded to run a 5K herself. Bob wandered ahead and Lexi stayed by the seniority stand. Hello, have you heard about seniority? Asked a trim man with a full head of white hair and cannily straight teeth and rimless glasses. He was wearing an Element t-shirt, a pair of long shorts and Birkenstock sandals. He seemed friendly enough, no particular accent. She imagined he was retired from some kind of professional job, enjoying the liberating feeling of casual clothing when in the past he would have been constrained by a formal shirt and jacket. Can't say I've heard of them. I'm not really in the target group, Lexi replied a little defensively, regretting her tone almost immediately in case it sounded rude. I'm only 40, but I do have a few friends who are a bit older. Thinking of Elsie. Maybe they would have something helpful for her new friend. What do you do? Quite a lot of things. We're always on the lookout for volunteers, and you don't have to be over 50 for that. This leaflet explains where we meet and the kind of activities we arrange. Lexi scanned the sheet of paper he handed her, thinking she would pass it on when she saw Elsie the next day. It was just what she expected to see. Weekly meetings in cafes, an advertisement from a local charity shop, drop-in advice sessions. The self-defense and Pilates classes look quite good. Do you know anything about the new Youthentic initiatives? She asked quietly, as she continued to glance down the page, remembering what Elsie had told her. I've heard there's some odd things going on. Not all good. My name's David, he said, holding out a hand to deliver a firm handshake. Lexi, she replied. Then he did something odd. He took his phone out of his pocket and, without saying anything, made a point of showing her that he was turning it off. He pointed at her phone, which was sticking out of her jeans pocket, and seemed to be suggesting she do the same. For a few moments they exchanged glances, David's eyebrows raised, nodding his head towards her phone, pointing, Lexi's brow more quizzical. Are you telling me to... David quickly put his finger to his lips, the universal command for silence. Yes, he was telling her to turn her phone off. was very strange. Lexi was curious to find out what was bothering David so much, as he didn't seem at all dangerous, and Bob was only a few steps away. She nodded her head in return and did as he asked. Can't be too careful. You never know when they're listening. Didn't mean to creep you out, David said. So to answer your question, yes, a number of our members have been talking to us about it. We're very worried about some of the things that are going on. Lexi said she was worried too, and David told David about what had been happening to Elsie since she turned 70. David looked far less shocked than she expected. What's happening to your friend? I'm afraid that's just the tip of the iceberg, he continued. There's actually far worse stuff going on, but I can't talk about that here. Not at the fair. If you really want to know more, there's a group of us getting together on Monday night. He took the leaflet she'd been reading from her hand and circled with an old-fashioned fountain pen what was billed as a volunteers session, taking place in a room at a local pub, before handing it back. If you're interested in hearing more, come there. When you arrive, you'll need to say that you've come for a meeting with Mr. Huxley.